the prayer for?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll try to get it up. Nothing else.
I
We
got mine.
paper copies. Let's go ahead and call the meeting of the Utilities Committee to order. We were having a discussion about our Novus agenda to see if we got utilities on that, so we can have this as electronic as opposed to paper copies. Just for declaration. Let's see, where we at? Call to order. All members are present with the exception of Councilman Turner. If we could, Mr. Dawson, if you would lead us in the invocation followed by the pledge, please.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you for all that you've given us and you continue to bestow upon us. We thank you, O God, for the blessing that you've given to Ascension Parish, and we thank you for the opportunity to even serve the people here. We pray that you give us wisdom to do the job well, because you said that you would give wisdom to all that who would ask, and we ask humbly for wisdom to guide your people well tonight. Again, we thank you for all that you've given us, and we thanks again for the ability to serve your people in Ascension. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. Item number 3, chairs additions. We have none for tonight. Public comment period. Anyone wishing to sign up and talk on any item, please report to the secretary and sign in. We're given 3 minutes when that item on the agenda comes up. Item number 5 is ACUD 1 chlorine residual. Mrs. Yonka. You can do it from there. That's good.
All right. At this time, we are still receiving good residuals at the point of entry from both St. James and Assumption Parish. We are also maintaining those levels at a 0.5 throughout the distribution system. So we haven't had any violations with DHH. We have been in compliance with that. Approximately 2 weeks ago, St. James Parish did lose pressure in their system, and it caused our pressure to drop below 20 PSI, and we had to do a ball water advisory. That ball water advisory was lifted within 3 days. We had to take samples. DHA showed we had no bacteria in the system, and everything was fine with that. Mr. Dawson did speak with St. James Parish regarding that.
Mr. Dawson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we did meet with St. James Parish along with Mr. Depew and as well as President Kenny Matassa to discuss the issues with the low water pressure. One of the issues is that a lot of times we were not notified when that happened. Our operators kind of will go and pull through the system to see where there were any issues. We addressed that, and it looks like that the communication situation will be improved and in the process of being approved. Some of the actual residual issues are being dealt with. In fact, they had 30 days that they were going to work on some stuff and get back to us about what would be their protocol to make sure that our residuals are good. As you know, is that if the residuals are low, we actually flush in order to make sure that we try to get that chlorine residual throughout the system. As Ms. Zianka said, that the residuals have been looking good. I think it's attributed to 2 things. One is it hadn't got real warm yet, and the second thing, the chlorine burn would sterilize our system some, which may have reduced that demand. But we are not waiting for that. We're in anticipation of possibly getting low residuals, and we are talking with St. James about it. So the next meeting, we should have some more information for you.
Okay. Questions? All right, thank y'all. Moving on, item number 6, the update on the Highway 42 sewer. Mr. Call.
Yeah, good evening. We have had a couple of delays in the progress of the project. We had the 12-inch water line for Ascension Water was encroaching close to the pipeline that we're laying and getting within the 6 feet separation. So we had to stop for a while and negotiate with a couple of homeowners to get, retain some extra servitude. And Ascension Water will be in the next week or so on site to move that water line to maintain that separation. The contractor has resumed beyond that point. They've completed the last bore across the highway, and we're down to approximately 400 feet left to complete pipe laying. That's the progress as of right now.
Whose task was it to identify where that water line was, or where we were going to have issues with that?
That water line was moved earlier on in the project, and it's as far into the right of way as it could be. And according to the markings, it looked like we had the separation, but until they started excavating and got to that point, and it's on the north side of Highway 42. It was the last 200 feet or so that it just meandered into.
So when you say 200 feet, where are we talking at? I mean, as far as location, on the west end or the east end of the project?
It's on the east end, on that extension towards Muddy Creek,
Okay.
At West Haven Drive.
Okay. Mr. Dawson?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the actual responsibility of identifying the water line doesn't lie with the parish. It's a DOTD project. I think they have a contract with Cardinal, I think is the name of the company that's supposed to do all the identifications. So some of the issues, I'm sure DOTD is addressing while they're.
Well, you know where I'm going with this.
Thanks.
I don't want to see the spokesperson for DOTD on camera at Channel 2 or anybody else sitting there blaming us for delaying this project because of this kind of stuff,
Yes,
like
sir.
we did on the 73 project.
That's right. It's not our responsibility to identify.
I had a
that.
conversation with the DOTD secretary at our conference in Shreveport about that, so hopefully we won't have those kind of
Yes, sir.
issues.
I knew that's where you were going with it.
Mr. Satterley?
Carl and Arcan, I'm not sure who, just as an FM line, that's a bastardization, I guess, of FYI, for your information, for my information. As always, I am a dumb beast awaiting my education. What is the rule for separation between a water and sewer line as far as how close can or cannot get together?
By DHH rules, we have to maintain a 6-foot separation horizontally from the sewer and the water line and 18 inches vertically.
And is that, Mr. Carl, for the obvious reason that if you would have a burst of the form of the sewer line?
Right,
you
to
could have
avoid
water line?
contamination of
Okay.
a water line.
How close
a water
were we
source.
in this case when they had to move the line?
I'm sorry.
How close were they, the line that you had to have moved?
We started getting within the when we noticed we were getting into the 6-foot range, we started assessing and they stopped, and it got to where we would have been approximately 2 feet away from it.
Okay.
So we
Good.
needed 4
Very
or 5
glad that was
extra feet.
detected, and thanks for the information.
Very good. Any other questions? Mr. Joseph?
Yeah. How far we are before we complete it and when we would be online on it, estimated time for that project?
We are, like I said, we have about 400 feet left to lay, and then to jump back and do after the water main is moved, we'll have that 200 feet section and set the manhole on that corner, and so by May 31st, we should be complete, and then we'll have a 30-day period where they have to wait before the testing can be performed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. All right, moving on. Item number 7, resolution to clarify and confirm sewer connection and development fees per ordinance section 18-117.5. Mr. Parrington.
Yes, we passed these fees in 2011, and when we did, we never discussed the difference between if someone gave us the system and didn't, so we needed to clarify that. Additionally, we never made any resolutions as to how we were going to deal with commercial and all this. So this is what we're doing, is we're just clarifying this so we can post it on the website so everybody knows. The fees are the same. We're just clarifying our problems, and we just want to put it on the website so everybody knows.
Okay.
So the motion to accept the resolution?
The motion is a resolution to accept the fees as clarified, I think is how we would
Yes.
state that.
Second.
So we got a motion by Mr. Joseph, a second by Mr. Satterley. Discussion? Okay. Any opposite, Mr. Caglin, I'm sorry.
Quickly, we've been collecting, and for the most part, we're aggressively going to start collecting.
What we're doing is, that's where the problem came in. We had the fees, but if you keep your own system, you had to pay the fee. If you gave us a system, you had to pay the fee. So we went back and we clarified that. If you dedicate the system to us, the value of your investment, not your labor, your investment, goes against this.
Okay.
If you decide to keep your own system, you got to cut a check.
But that's the clarification we need.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we didn't have a method, we never talked about how to handle anything beyond single-family residential. It just said it was left up to the engineer. So now what we're doing is putting in here and said they got to negotiate that, and we're doing it the same way. What are your investments? How many units you're going to have? What's the size? What's the size of your meter and things like that, so engineers can be involved in that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
O'Neill,
Yes, sir.
real quick, we've got some a new member on the board or the committee. So I know we've taken some action as far as what this committee can do and can't do. So as far as this resolution and whether or not it needs to go to the full council
It
for
does not.
adoption, can you explain that to us?
Okay.
Just to make sure everybody's on the same page in what we're doing.
When we redid the ordinance, this is, the council passed these fees. When we redid the ordinance, it said that the utility committee was going to set the fees. At this point in time, we're not changing any fees, so we're going to do that right now. We need to go back and revisit that issue because raising fees requires a two-third vote of the council. But at least we're not changing any fees. But what we're doing here is letting y'all, we're clarifying there was confusion as to how this thing was going to be applied, and so we just want to make it clear. And we're aggressively making sure this is now got to be an issue addressed before you can get a final plat signed.
Okay, and we're going to make sure that we are communicating that to people as they come in, as well as putting it on the website as to what this is all about, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Sadler?
Yeah, and along those lines, O'Neill, so that I and the public understand this, Ordinance Sec 18-117-5, you're saying, is not in any functional or any other way going to change. We're just clarifying that language because some people right now are not understanding what the intent was.
Yes, we're trying to make sure everybody understands what they got to do. That's exactly, and we were clarifying the issue.
And we can do that legally by just this resolution.
Yes,
What I heard
we're
from
not changing
Benny's
any
question
fees.
is it doesn't have to go up to the council, nothing, we just have to advertise it.
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions, discussion? Any opposition to the resolution? Hearing none, that resolution passes. Moving on to item 8, the status of the Lemonville evaluation for LCDBG grant. Mr. Ken Dawson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're in the process of.
The mic, I don't know if it's on. There you go.
Okay. All right. We are in the process of finalizing the contract. In fact, the contract should have been signed today. What we did, we hired a company, PEC, to help us evaluate the lift stations and the capacity of the system. There's a lot of development happening in that area. I mean, we're bringing in those hotels and we're bringing in other things associated with that, and there's also some discussion about what we could possibly do with St. Jude. So before we travel down that road too quickly without understanding technically what the size of the line can bear, what the lift station can bear, we have an engineering firm that's going to do the evaluation to see what we have going on in there now, and what the capacity of the system that can handle. That contract was signed. I think we probably should have gotten it today. So we're going to be offering a notice to proceed forward with their evaluation probably tomorrow if they've sent their signed copy of the contract to us today, which they told me they would. So after that, we will be able to know exactly what we can handle. And I'm sure that Mr. Joseph is looking at that because of all the increased development that's happening right there in that area. We want to make sure that we capture that commercial for sure. And I think there's several hotels and maybe even some restaurants that they're looking at locating there. So we just want to be prepared. And if we need to do other things, we can.
Okay. Mr. Joseph?
Yes, and this one block grant here, the Lemonville community in that area is eligible for it, and we had it one time. We had almost $700,000.
Yes.
And due to lack of development in that area and lack of funds, we basically let the funds go back. So I'm basically asking so we can evaluate this. Now, like we say, it's an economic boom in that area, but we are missing out on the infrastructure in that. And this, if we can get between $700,000 to $1 million in block grant, that definitely would help us with the financing on our part. So that's
Yes,
why I requested to review, go back to review this
I've
process.
already spoken with Ms. Collins in our grant department, so we're going to go back and see the availability of that and see what's available. That's the process as well, and I think that she's already working on that.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? All right, moving on to item number 9, discussion of policies and procedures for one-time rate reduction for HCUD 1 customers. Ms. Bianca and Ms. Celeste isn't here, but I guess Mr. Dawson, y'all gonna handle that?
Yes.
Well, according to our policy, in the event a customer have a high monthly bill due to water leak, they have the right to request a one-time adjustment. We have a few customers that have requested one-time adjustments and payment plans and then have reduced our past-due accounts receivable. So we are receiving money from customers now. And according to finance, Mr. Les gave me a report saying within the last 3 months, we have collected approximately $10,000 from customers as money that was due to us, past-due accounts.
So what we're saying is that by ordinance, we're not giving them anything, but we can charge them basically what we pay for the water, so it's not a free pass, and they get to do that one time. So if they have another leak a couple months down the line, they're just on the hook for whatever the fee is, because I know what happens with that is if the water leak is on your side of the meter, it's your problem.
It's your responsibility.
And so we can give them that one-time rate relief, or they can choose to do work out some monthly payments with us in order to cover, depending on the size of the bill, or they can pay it outright, whatever, those 3 options. But the one-time rate reduction is a one-time issue, so nobody's getting anything for free is what we're saying.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's
Mr. Joseph?
Right, and that question had came up because the attorney had did some homework and he had brought that up. And my only problem is with the policy and procedure of it is that we're never looked at it or approved whatever that policy and procedure is on that reduction rate, how it work or how it formalized. And I think that's my major concern is that we need to know exactly how that rate system work, reduction of it, okay? Once again, is it 10% rate reduction, 25% rate reduction, 30% rate reduction? What it is, I do not know. So, I mean, my biggest thing is just looking at the policy and procedure and make sure we fall in line with other utility district around the area and that we are, doing it properly.
Mr. Dawson?
Yeah, and I understand exactly what Councilman Joseph is saying is absolutely right. Since we cannot give anything for free, any increase in profit, for lack of a better word, or any delinquent payment costs there, we've been taking that out and just kind of working on strictly you pay what the cost of the water is, okay? And then we were able to work out any payment plan if you need to. We really try to work with the people to try to help them in understanding. And Councilman Jones and I have been working with this for a while, and even quite honestly, there was a lack of communication at one time, even being able to explain to the customer what their issues were. There were some accounting things that we were able to work through. For instance, at one time, they may have had a delinquent fee charge, and they may have been thought or told that they could pay a certain amount, and the delinquent fee was continually being charged. So all those issues have been cleared up based on where it was done before, and that's why I think you see a success in what's happening. Those numbers of delinquencies have decreased. We have done a good job in collecting other funds that were out there that were due the parish, and we're going to continue to do it. And what we will do is that we are working on a kind of more clarified manual and policy and procedure that has kind of been updated. We're working with the committee, because as you know, and O'Neill could probably explain a little bit more in detail, since there is a tax that's being gathered over there, there has to be that ACUD #1 committee on the West Bank that still has to be seated, and we work with them. So those discussions are going on with them, and we'll bring it to you guys after, they continue to look through it. So even the request for some of the payments, say for instance, there's a request for a one-time forgiveness or some type of payment plan, that's the group that normally goes through it and talk to them and approve.
Can we do a couple of things, Ken? Why don't we get the policy to the members?
Sure.
So we can look at it and review it. If we got any further questions, we can put it on next month's agenda and talk about that.
It should be attached to your notice.
The policy
Y'all can
is,
get-
they
y'all
can't
can-
get it on
Yeah,
there.
we couldn't get
We
on
can't
over,
figure out
so,
why it's not coming up, but it's okay. Here's one, Councilman Joseph, you take this one. This is what was attached to the email that you received.
okay.
So you have it in your email, and we'll have to call Novus back tomorrow and figure out.
Y'all didn't get it.
Okay, yeah,
Why it's not
we'll get that straight
communicated.
with the agenda. Thanks, Kimberly, on that. And the other thing is, can we do, I know we do it in other places, but can we do a quarterly report on ACUD as far as the finances and what's
Sure,
going on
sure,
with that
absolutely.
and the issues to this committee?
Yes.
And we're in the second quarter, so might as well do,
We can-
next meeting, do a report on the first quarter as far as activities
Can we send
and
them last
finances and all that. And
What we'll do, we'll have Celeste send you the last quarter, email it to all of you, and then we will have on, for the second quarter, we'll actually have a part of the agenda to discuss at that meeting.
Okay,
Okay?
very good.
Good. Thank you.
In addition to that, too, we've gotten in the door tag that we're going to start putting on the doors, and when we identify leaks and problems past the meter. And those have come in, and we're going to start using those.
Oh, definitely need that.
I think that was, Councilman Joseph asked about that. How do we notify the public when there are issues? And the door tags was an idea that the staff developed, that if there's an issue that we find, it's not just waiting until your bill comes, but there will be a door tag that will be placed on your door to say that, we think that there's a leak, you need to address it, or come to the office and talk to us, something like that.
Yeah, so before we send them a big bill, we're trying to be proactive, and I
Yes.
think that's a positive with anything that, it's a service we provide to the citizens, right? So I think that's
Yes,
a
sir.
step in the right direction. Mr. Sadler?
Yeah, I think Bill just answered my question. I was curious if they get a one-time forgiveness, they've got a wet spot their side of the meter, they run some water, we give them forgiveness. How do we keep it from happening a second time?
I don't want y'all
don't
to
give
keep
them
on saying
forgiveness.
forgiveness. Right, there's no one-time forgiveness, it's a
Councilman Joseph, I'm
reduction,
just
it's a
using the words of
reduction.
Mr. Ken
It's a
Dawson.
reduction. Cause legal is looking at me and him there, so.
There's no forgiveness of the
Mr.
cost
Dawson,
of
do you want
water.
to change that word? And I'll
Yes,
be glad to
sir.
change mine.
It's a reduction.
Repeating of the same. Reduction, okay. And it is a poor choice of words, isn't it? So then the hand tag is the situation, they know.
Yes. they know.
Okay.
And another thing that I want this committee to think about, and
Because by the way, I had it happen, and I don't have this water system recently. And I don't want to use the word forgiveness again. I didn't even get a reduction in my bill from the water company I'm dealing with up in Prairieville, and I had to have my plumber out and everything, and it was just like tough luck, So I think it's wonderful that we having, what's a good word here, some compassion in our policies and procedures, and I'd like to take a look at what was passed out a minute or two, since it's not on Novus right
yes,
now.
sir. And I think one thing too is that I think that people don't realize just how a little drip, a few drips
Oh,
in the
yeah.
faucet,
You should
how
see my
how
bill.
much water loss that really is.
Yep.
And I had a document one time that we're going to see. We're going to kind of get out that if you have, and I'm not going to even try to quote the numbers because I don't remember it, but just a few drops, a minute could equate to gallons. Of water losses, and that's what you have to pay for. So when someone says they have a leak or they see a little water out there, they may not think that it doesn't mean a lot, but when the bill comes, it means excessive amount. Another thing for the committee to consider, and we were working on, is that when there is someone that it may be an elderly person that has a leak and may not be able to fix it. Well, we can't go in and do it ourselves because we can't enter into private property and do it. But we're looking at working with nonprofit organizations that maybe even have the skill set to do it. And to show you the nature of the people we have working over there, one of our guys said that on his off time, on weekends, if there's one of those issues where they have an elderly family or elderly lady or somebody couldn't do it, that he will volunteer his time to go in there and assist in fixing leaks. So you know, I think things are moving in the right direction.
Kudos, Tim. Kudos.
Finally, on that same subject, that I'm a technology guy, and I found out we have the Neptune meters that have the radios on the Neptune meters. They're also capable, and not very expensive, we were looking into that now, is that if you start to get a high demand on a particular meter, it'll send you a message that says there's excessive use on that particular meter at that particular address, and that would trigger a door tag notice from a remote site.
Mr. Joseph?
And just by the way, technology, I don't know yet, but if that's the case and you have iPhone, I don't know if the technology had caught up where they can notify the customer if they would give us an email information where your meter's out of norm. I don't know if that capability.
That capability exists if you have an iPhone. And a lot of the elderly don't have the iPhones or that, so, but it will. You can actually address the text message alert, just like you can with a GPS, to identify what emails you want to send that to or what text number you want to send it to. So if you have the customer's information, you can actually send them a live text real time.
I think that's the next step we'll be going to the future, and I mean, I know that would be great for those customers.
One other thing, I'm
Yes, sir.
sorry, excuse me, but I don't know if y'all know who this is. I mean, Mr. Depew, along with other duties with the parish, is assuming the responsibility of the utility department. He's bringing that management skill set, and as he just said, the technology skill set with him. And so he will be handling, that management responsibility. So
So is he officially our director, or
he's
we haven't got there yet?
He's officially the director.
Okay.
All right.
Welcome aboard. Glad to hear that. I was getting questioned about that the other day, matter of fact. So,
Hopefully we'll have the same success that I feel that Fleet has done in the last 3 years.
there you go. Looking forward to that happening. Anything else on that item? Okay. Moving on to item number 10, discussion regarding the amount of funding being given to Baton Rouge Water Company for fire hydrants. Mr. Bill Depew.
How you doing? I went back, and this is a project that goes back all the way back to 1996. And then there was a franchise agreement done in 2006, which is a 20-year franchise agreement that will not expire until 2026. After going through all the documents, on this chart of a notice, we're going to do an internal audit, or we're going to an external audit of what's been paid for the hydrants over the since the franchise agreement was put in place. We're also going to do a physical audit to see what hydrants have been put in, where they are, and if they comply. So at the next committee meeting, I expect to have a full report in writing and a presentation as to exactly where the money is going and how much longer we'll have to do it. Right now, the way it's working is you cannot exceed the amount of the franchise payment that we receive from Ascension Water, and that equates to, I think it was $454,000 last year. And then the cost of the rental and the installation of the fire hydrants was $454,000. It's really, the fire hydrants are used as a method of a capital recovery fund that they've invested into the water system. It's pretty complex.
Mr. Joseph.
I'm not going to go to all the questions. Bill, I'm looking forward for your report next month. But the question was, and I put it on the agenda because when I heard the $450,000 we giving Baton Rouge Water for fire hydrant, it just, basically just stumped me because I remember that franchise fees started off like $150,000. And, the number is growing and we add an additional fees in it. And I mean, we say we didn't want water be public water. And I think when we get these numbers, we're going to see we could have invested in it ourselves, over the long haul of the debt of this this agreement we have.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to see what those numbers are. And
If I can give you the numbers now, the original numbers for fire hydrants to be refurbished and repaired in the Darrow area was $650. The current invoice was for 1,728 fire hydrants that have been installed since 2006. 1,728 fire hydrants.
But I think Bill and I met today. You're not really paying for the fire hydrants. That's just it's the basis for paying the fee for the capital investments in the system. And I understand what you're trying to find out, but it's really not, you're not paying that for the fire hydrant itself. You're paying for the capital investment of the system, and that's what we need to audit and see what we've actually spent and what's been invested, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why when we met and went through it today, because I had the same thing you did when I heard of it. I was like, wait a second, we're doing this, and that's just a method to keep track of how much, I guess, how big the lines are and how far the lines are going and what they're expending on the system. And so it's really a misnomer to say you're buying fire hydrants for that. That's just a method used to do the calculation for the capital investments.
There's a couple of things within this that I think that we don't understand. At least when the initial agreement was brought out, I was on the fire board at the time. They brought us in about 2 or 3 weeks before they went and signed this agreement, and started asking questions of the fire service. A couple of things came to mind, obviously, afterwards, that we didn't know about then. So a lot of development has paid for the expansion of this system, as opposed to, don't get me wrong, they're investing in it. They're investing money into expanding the system as well. But the question is, from a percentage standpoint of view, how much has Ascension Water invested in expanding the system versus having a development come in and expand the system to get to the new subdivision type situation overall? The other thing that they had in this that I don't remember the exact wording of the agreement, but their plan was to charge a $300 per hydrant annual fee. And so you've got two different monetary things kicking back in there. And one of the things that we tried to get pushback on, but was unfortunately too late, is I think they're charging $50 a year in Baton Rouge, if I remember correctly.
They are charging $50 a year per hydrant as a rental. They identify it as a rental fee, and then there's a separate $300 for the fire hydrant installation. And again, like O'Neill said, it's really used as an instrument of measuring, paying back capital recovery costs for the pipes, the mains, and all the stuff they're putting in to expand the system.
And I would like some clarification on what services are we getting for that money.
That is
I
the
understand
question.
expanding the system. I get that. And you're getting the money for the franchise fee put back in there. But if you're charging me that $350 on an annual basis, what are you doing in that hydrant every year?
And it raised a lot of questions, and that's why I want to do it at the next committee meeting, because it also talks about who retains the title for the capital investment that on the hydrants.
That's theirs. And that's in the contract, that if we do anything, we can go out there and run a water line. It don't matter how long it is. As soon as it's tied into their system, they own it.
Correct.
They own it. It doesn't matter what happens to it.
And I have,
That raises the question, who's responsible for testing the pressure, testing the hydrants, making sure they're code, fire code?
They are
meet
their
code?
customers. It is in their system, and they comply with all the regulations and their call-ins.
Water
Yeah.
company?
Yes. Except for the small area, well, they do that for us under an O&M contract and a water contract for the Darrow area, which was originally that District 6, I believe it was originally. They have an O&M agreement to operate and maintain our system, and that's a separate agreement.
And we were forced to go into that agreement because the water was coming from St. James, and when Ormet sold, they told them take the water line out of there. So there was no other water to go there except Ascension Water. We didn't have a choice as to what we were going to do there. They either going to have no water in that system, or we had to go with Ascension Water, and we did it that way.
And initially, there were a lot of hydrants that did not meet. They had the smaller lines. They didn't meet the requirements. So part of that original agreement was to upgrade those and swap out those.
And don't get me wrong, they've done a lot of good work. I mean, I don't want to belay that fact. I mean, there's fire hydrants in trailer parks that we hadn't had before. We negotiated those issues out. There's fire hydrants in subdivisions. We've got ordinances governing where those are at, and I think the fire service proactively years ago did the smart things in saying not only do we want them inside the subdivision, we want them at the entrance of the subdivision, because in the areas where we don't have water, the tank trucks can go there and fill up instead of having to go inside the subdivision and deal with the children and everything else and the cars and stuff inside the subdivision maneuvering around there. So, I mean, on both sides of the parish and the water company, I think we've done some very proactive things, and there's a lot of things that have been very positive out of this agreement. But there are some things that give you some serious pause, in my opinion. Mr. Sadler, you had a comment?
Yeah, I think I'm fine again, because the last word I heard from you, Bill, was the word maintenance, and I was curious who's taking care of that. So they're required to do that as well.
They're required to do that.
They flush them, they do that, they install them.
Is that, I don't know a lot about this, but I heard that could get to be pretty expensive.
It is, on the use of the water and the cost of doing it. They also do all of the water testing that we do in the ACUD1 system. They do all of that, the same thing. They're a, certified water system.
And just for yucks, doesn't this all affect the, what's it called, the PIAL rating?
The fire rating.
The rating and the
So
insurance
everybody knows a
rating
lot about that.
for fires. Now, I did discover there are some other water companies in the parish that do not have franchise agreements with the parish. I don't know how big they are.
It's one of the only franchise agreements we have in the parish.
In fact, the only one for water, for sure.
Yeah. So, Mr. Dawson?
Yeah, just to, the testing and the testing issue, Councilman Sadler, you talk about the expense of having to make sure you maintain it. Part of that expense is making sure you have good quality coming in. So because they're a water system and they are a provider themselves, the quality of the water is such that they don't have to flush as much as we have to do on ACUD #1 because of the quality that we're getting from some of our providers. Even though it has improved a bit, I just want to make sure that we, not looking at what their cost would be to maintain as compared to what we have to do on the West Bank right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the flow testing, because there's a lot of things that need to happen and some of the parameters are changed, and I'm not up to speed 100% on that, but I don't, I think the requirements by the PIL people have dropped. We can check with the fire service to confirm that, exactly what they're supposed to be doing for us. But, flushing the hydrants out twice a year or doing the testing like they're supposed to be doing, that would be interesting to see that they're doing that. And as far as the cost of the water and that's happening with that, it's not like it used to be to where you'd be flowing water for minutes, 15, 20 minutes to get testing done. I don't think it's that extravagant anymore. And so that cost that they're bearing, I mean, when it comes to maintenance on a hydrant, there's not even a grease fitting on the thing. So there's really not a whole lot of time spent there so I mean, keeping it ain't like it, you need to paint it every year. Somebody runs over it, their insurance is covering that. So, I mean, I'm curious about where they come up with that $300 fee from.
Yeah. Well, the other part of it, too, I talked to Mr. Jean today, and they're doing flushing, and they're doing inspections of the same fire hydrants that are in this agreement, so.
Exactly.
So one more stab at.
Sure.
One more bite at the apple. So we don't have a lot of that in my district, but we do have some. I won't name subdivisions, but I've had constituents complain that since they live in there many, many years, they've never seen someone come out and flush one of these hydrants. So, Bill, are we going to see that type of information in your report, or?
We will. We'll find out. Maybe they're doing it at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Well, you say you were going to do a paper report and you're going to
Right.
go out in the field as well. So I would recommend you knock on a few doors in D4 and talk to some of the people I do, not regularly, but that have called up and asked me about that. It's always, and I use good people. Nothing's going on, but they're just curious that if something did go on, would this thing really work that's been in front of my house and I've never seen anybody, you mentioned paint it, much less take a cap off of it and blow some water out of it and see if it's all copacetic.
And I can imagine the worst thing that happened is to open up a fire hydrant and nothing come out when you need it.
I've even heard that story,
Been there, done that.
and I would tell the constituent, I didn't hear you took the cap off of it.
Well, we'll get the,
good luck with
Mr. Jean, they keep a list of the ones that they've done, and then I will get a listing from Ascension Water of the ones they've done.
And that's something, I mean, for efficiency, we don't need to be doing that. I mean, if it's in the agreement that they're going to do that and can provide us with the proper data to provide the PIL that they're doing that, then we're wasting their water and wasting our time. So, I mean, if we can get that data from them, and they have offered to do that, we just need to make sure it fits what we need for our insurance rating through the fire service, and I mean, we don't need to double dip, and the guys on the fire service, I'm sure will be happy not to have to go out there, the volunteers, and take their time to go out there and flow test these things, so, that's something we can check into from them, and so within the franchise agreement, do we have something that says they need to provide us with certain documentation of what they're doing?
It does identify the documentation they have to provide, but I talked to Mr. Roland Jackson today, who happened to have been part of the original 96 effort, and he's been on it all along. And any reports that they have available on their testing and inspection and those kinds of things we can have access to. I can tell you we're going to be more proactive in monitoring and because we're paying money for this. It's not completely independent of us. Is we're going to start monitoring and getting reports and working closer with him. I have a meeting set up with him next week, and we're going to sit down and go over the history and start the audit process.
Get with me after the meeting, because I got an agenda item for you for that meeting.
One quick question. Mr. O'Neill,
Sir.
you know, some of these subdivision was here before we went in this franchise agreement. Are they exempt from Baton Rouge Water for testing their fire hydrant? I'm just because Doc say no.
My only experience is I know they put fire hydrants in my subdivision. They've been out to test them.
The agreement was, if I remember it correctly, the agreement was where they had water systems, they were retroactively gonna go in and update that.
Yes.
So they didn't necessarily, if they came in prior to, parish water coming in, they didn't have hydrants. And so part of the agreement, that was one of the benefits of this thing, was part of the agreement was that they were gonna go back and retrofit those subdivisions with hydrants. And so anything that's on their system, they have the ability to test, or they are in the process of actually testing them. To what extent, I'm not 100% sure, but that's something hopefully we'll find out in the near future.
I can tell you this, they came into my subdivision, upgraded the lines and put in new fire hydrants probably in the last 3 or 4 years. And
Yeah.
everybody in my subdivision, it's a 200-foot lot, so it can't be a real beneficial to them, but they did it in the
Yeah, I mean, they're taking care of the systems, no doubt about that.
Mr. Chairman, along those lines, it wouldn't be a bad idea, Bill, to have them just, whatever reports, data they give you, get it on a monthly basis. How many did you check? How many did you install?
That defines a new, every biannually there to provide the clerk of court a file copy and provide us a soft copy and hard copy of the MAC of their current system.
That'd be a good thing to share with us, I think.
And I
Right,
think
Mr.
they've
Chairman?
got that, yeah, no doubt, if we could get that information as well. And I think they've got it in there to share with the fire service as well, where they add in fire hydrants at, so they know, so they can make sure they're marked properly for the.
Yeah, I intend to work closer with Mr. Jean and because it's primarily for the fire department, make sure they're coordinated with what's going on so that they don't get left out.
Yeah, don't leave out District 3 with Chief Stewart and those guys as well. And make sure that's going on, and you may even have some conversations with the town of Sorrento. I know that they have, if I'm understanding correct, they have a contract with Baton Rouge Water or Ascension Water to maintain their system as well. So there may be some efficiencies we can garner through all of those different systems together. Anything else? All righty, moving on to item 11, the amended purchase agreement with People's Water. Mr. Parrington.
Yes. Under the purchase agreement that we have with People's Water, we would have closed 60 days within the approval by the Public Service Commission. That would have been May 23rd of next month. Obviously, we didn't want to close, and they can't meet the requirements of the closing. They've asked for an extension of the purchase agreement till August 31st of 2016. Nothing changes. All it is just give us some time to see if they can solve their problems or if they're not. So we're not changing anything. There is an investigation going on. We're not really privy to what's going on with DHH and anybody else, EPA, et cetera. So, I mean, until then, we can always leave, but they've just asked for an extension of the time.
Okay.
So moved.
Any discussion? So, O'Neill, I guess one of the questions is there a way that we can get with, I don't know if we'd have to go through Peoples or whatever to request any kind of findings that this investigation comes up with to make sure that we're making the right decision, right?
They're public, right. They'll be public. There is an administrative order that they're already required to do, and we have a copy of it.
Okay.
But, I mean, they're still in the investigative stage, and I think EPA is also involved in an investigative stage. Obviously, if an investigation is going on, we're not going to buy the company until that's over and we can see what we want to do at that point in time. So that's why the extension, we're not giving up anything, we're not doing anything, we're just, we told them, if you want to be part of this deal, you need to come to us and ask for an extension. We're not asking them, they're asking us.
So, any idea how long this investigation is gonna last?
No. Well, I can't tell you that. There's some other legal issues with the lawsuits involved too that require them to clear the title, and I think that's gonna take more than 120 days, to be honest with you.
Right, and that's kind of where I'm going with this thing. I mean, and just as a side note, I mean, part of the reason for the public's information as well as everyone here, we got into this negotiation with People's Waters. The reasons are varied, and I don't want people to jump up there and say this is a bad deal all of a sudden because they're having these issues, because it's really not, in the sense that we're buying water from two separate parishes, two separate entities that we have no control over what they're sending to us, and we've actually had to go in and purchase additional equipment to raise the treatment levels or get the chlorine residual levels up in our system to make sure that we're able to meet the new standards because of the brain-eating amoeba issues. And we're having to flush those lines more because we can't control, or we don't control exactly what we're getting. And so it's costing us a ton of money, so, or a good bit of money. And so the benefit of having our own system is that we can control it. It's a shorter run. We're not getting water coming from miles away. It's all within a consolidated system, and we can control our destiny as far as what we're getting and what it's actually costing us to operate the system and achieve some efficiencies that we can't with the way we're currently conducting business with the systems we have over there. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater yet. Let's reserve, my suggestion is reserve our opinion as to whether or not we need to go through with this deal until after a lot of this investigation's over, and it's actually we've got some concessions I think we've already identified within the current agreement that we have that we need to get changed within the contract, and that needs to go through to fruition after all this stuff is done and we actually get into the nitty-gritty of negotiating the final contract. But again, let's not overreact just yet.
And
Mr. Joseph.
Yes, just to add to your comments on it, the reason why it's so important, because of economic development. We have hotels, and those customers right now we have 4 hotels, and they depend on the water pressure, and there's customers in those hotels that have that water pressure. And this here will eliminate a whole lot of problems that we have in those areas from St. James and Assumption. But the biggest thing is economic. I mean, we have a major industrial park that we will be able to supply from this area, and the growth on that side of the river, the potential growth on that side of the river. So, like you say, not just look at it and just look at the situation they're in now. It will pay off in the future. So, I have one more question for Mr. O'Neill. Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
the Public Service Commission, do we have to get that approved to them if we go beyond this 120 days?
No.
It's
No, they
in-house,
said
it's us?
It's us. They've approved them to sell. It's
Okay.
it's now, do we want to buy? And we don't want to buy until we resolve these issues. So
But
the sale they're still under the operation of the Public Service Commission until we buy it.
Okay.
And we can set some contingencies in this thing if, I know there's some suits that were filed or being filed, and basically once the investigation part of this is over with, I mean, you can negotiate within that
They're going to be responsible for the
financially
loss.
for all of that
There's no
prior to us
question.
taking ownership, right?
There's no
Or that
question.
deal definitely wouldn't go through if we couldn't get that
Right.
done.
There's not, we're going to get a free and clear company, or we're not going to do a deal. We're not going to recommend you do a deal. It's up to you to do the deal. But that's there's a notice, it's called the notice of lease pendants filed, which is actually like a mortgage on the property, so they can't sell. That's why they're requesting this. It's their responsibility to resolve those lawsuits.
Basically like a lien on a house. If someone's got a
Yes.
lien on a house, that's the owner's issue.
It's their
separate
issue.
from Mr. Sadler.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to be certain, Mr. Parrington, I got the question just today on my campaign Facebook site. that if, with the controversy going on, obviously people are concerned. If we were to buy the asset, we do not have to abide by the Public Service Commission in setting rates. The council would then do that. Is that not correct?
That's what the approval of the Public Service Commission allowed us to do, to buy it. Then we're the public entity owning it. They're not under the purview of the Public Service Commission once they belong to the parish.
Okay, just wanted to be sure I answered the question correctly. Thank you.
Anything else? Mr. Dawson?
Just one thing, and I just want to kind of, I guess reiterate. The acquisition of People's Water from a technical standpoint was definitely the right way to go. And from a health and safety standpoint, was definitely the right way to go. We want to have control of our own destiny from a health and safety standpoint, because going through a process where we had to fight residuals for the braining of amoeba is something that we don't want to do, and it's something that could be handled if we have some type of control. So the whole decision that this committee made, and as well as the council in support of it, was definitely a sound decision, and hopefully all the other legal issues and all the issues will be taken care of so it can move forward.
Yeah, and I, some conversation I've had with fellow council members as well as other folks, I mean, I won't support it unless all the legal issues are resolved, for sure. And there's some things, like I said, there's some things within the current agreement that we have that are gonna have to change in order to make this thing happen, as I understand, the situation. So, I mean, we're not just going to go in here and say, okay, we've already got an agreement, let's go with it. No, that's not going to happen. I won't support that, and I think there's several other members. I don't know of anybody on this body that would, or I don't know of anybody on the full council that actually would, to be honest with you.
No,
at this point in time. So it's not anything we're just going to jump to and say, yeah, we got it kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, anything else? With that, item number 12.
Move for German.
Motion adjourned by Mr. Cagnolati, second by Mr. Sadler. We are adjourned. Thank you.